Welcome to Billionaire Success Lessons, the channel where success is not measured only by wealth, but by purpose, character, resilience, and the way a person chooses to use the life they have been given. Today, we are talking about Alice Walton, a woman whose story is often reduced to a simple label: Walmart heiress. But that label is far too small for the life she has actually lived. Yes, Alice Walton was born into one of the most influential business families in America. Yes, her father was Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. But the deeper story of Alice Walton is not just about inheritance. It is about identity. It is about finding a calling that is not identical to the family business, and then building that calling with enough courage, conviction, and persistence to make it matter in its own right. Her life is not the classic story of a founder launching a company from nothing. It is something more subtle and, in some ways, more difficult. It is the story of a woman born inside an enormous legacy, who still had to discover what part of that legacy would truly become her own. Over time, that search led her not only through finance and business, but into art, philanthropy, education, and health. Today, she is closely associated with Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Art Bridges, the Alice L. Walton Foundation, and the Alice L. Walton School of Medicine. That path tells us something important from the very beginning. Success is not always about repeating the road that came before you. Sometimes it is about honoring where you came from, while still having the courage to become something different. Alice Walton was born in 1949, the only daughter and youngest of 4 children of Sam and Helen Walton. She grew up in a world shaped by enterprise, movement, and the relentless energy of a family that was building something big. But even in childhood, there were signs that her interests were not going to fit neatly inside one box. When she was young, she sold candy and popcorn outside her father's store in Bentonville. And with her earnings, she bought a print of Picasso's Blue Nude. That detail may seem small, but it says a great deal. Many children are influenced by the world around them. Yet Alice Walton was already blending business and beauty, commerce, and curiosity. She was learning how money worked, but she was also learning what moved her spirit. That early love of art would not disappear. It would stay with her for decades, quietly growing even while life pulled her through other careers and responsibilities. Sometimes the deepest calling in a person's life appears early, not as a loud announcement, but as a quiet attraction. And that keeps returning. That seems to be true for Alice Walton. Even while living inside the orbit of America's biggest retail dynasty, she was already being drawn toward a different kind of value. Not only the value of products and profits, but the value of culture, imagination, and emotional meaning. As she grew older, Alice Walton did not simply drift through privilege without direction. She studied at Trinity University and later built a career in finance. She worked as an equity analyst at First Commerce, then as an options trader at E.F. Later served as vice chairman and head of investments at Arvis Bank, and in 1988 started an investment bank called Llama Company, where she served as chief executive officer. That part of her story matters because it proves something essential. She did not spend her life standing passively next to wealth. She entered the working world, made decisions, took risks, and tested her own abilities in environments where performance mattered. Finance is not an easy world, especially for someone trying to establish an identity outside the shadow of a famous family. It demands analysis, confidence, timing, and resilience. And while Alice Walton would later become best known for art and philanthropy, these years in finance were not wasted detours. They taught her how systems work, how capital moves, how institutions are built, and how strategic decisions can shape long-term outcomes. In many lives, people are tempted to dismiss chapters that do not become the final headline. But sometimes those chapters of preparation, sometimes the tools we gain in one world become the instruments we later use in another. Still, a life can be professionally active and personally difficult at the same time. Alice Walton's story includes pain, mistakes, and struggle. And those parts matter because they make her journey human rather than polished. Public biographies and reference sources describe serious automobile accidents in her life, including a devastating crash in Mexico in 1983. That shattered her leg and led to many surgeries, with lingering pain afterward. Those details are not the part of the story most people celebrate, but they are important because suffering changes people. Physical pain has a way of slowing life down and forcing a person to confront limits, vulnerability, and the fragility of control. There are also moments in her biography that reflect public controversy and hard judgment. A life does not become meaningful because it is free from trouble. A life becomes meaningful when a person continues to build something of value in spite of trouble. And perhaps even because trouble has deepened the way they see the world. Alice Walton's path was not smooth. It included hardship, scrutiny, and personal struggle. That does not erase what she later built. If anything, it makes her later work more interesting, because it suggests that the desire to create beauty, access, healing, and meaning did not come from an untouched life. It came from a life that knew pain and still chose contribution. What makes Alice Walton especially fascinating is that she did not become defined by Walmart in the way the public might have expected. She could have chosen to remain known primarily as a retail heiress, a shareholder, or a billionaire attached to a family empire. Instead, over time, she moved more and more decisively toward art. She became a serious collector, patient, acquiring important works by major American artists including Winslow Homer, Edward Hopper, and others. But her vision grew far beyond private collecting. That vision became institutional. She founded Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, and Crystal Bridges opened in 2011 with a mission rooted in public access to American art. This is where her story begins to take on a very different meaning. She was no longer simply purchasing art for private enjoyment. She was building a cultural institution in a place many people would never have expected to become a major art destination. That took more than money. It took imagination. It took conviction. It took a willingness to be underestimated. Building a museum of that scale in Northwest Arkansas was not the obvious move. It was a statement. It said that great art should not belong only to a handful of elite cities or to people already inside traditional cultural circles. It said that access matters. It said that geography should not decide. who gets to stand in front of something beautiful and be changed by it. And that may be one of the deepest parts of Alice Walton's journey. She did not simply collect art as status. She treated art as a public good. Crystal Bridges was designed not merely as a museum, but as a way of widening the circle of access. Alice Walton's motivation was to bring art to people who might never otherwise experience it. That tells us something profound about the shape of her purpose. Many people with resources buy rare things in order to make themselves feel more exclusive. Alice Walton used resources to make something important feel more available. That is a different mindset entirely. It reflects a belief that beauty and culture are not luxuries reserved for a few, but human experiences that can enrich entire communities. Her journey reminds us that success can mature. It can move from ownership to access, from private accumulation to public invitation. That movement is significant because it transforms wealth from a shield around one person into a door opened for many others, in a world where money often narrows the circle. Alice Walton's museum widened it, and that may be one of the reasons her story resonates far beyond business. It is not just about what she had. It is about what she made possible. But the story did not stop with Crystal Bridges. In 2017, Alice Walton founded Art Bridges, an organization created to expand access to American art across the United States by partnering with museums through grants, collection loans, and traveling exhibitions. Art Bridges now works with hundreds of museums nationwide. This matters because it shows that her vision was never meant to remain inside one campus, one city, or one personal legacy project. It was scalable. It was distributive. It was national in ambition. Again, this is where her life becomes especially meaningful. She did not simply build a beautiful institution and then stop. She kept asking the next question: how can more people have access? How can smaller and regional museums participate more fully in cultural life? How can art travel farther than it normally would? That is the kind of thinking that separates a single project from a movement. It reveals a person who is not satisfied merely by personal achievement. It reveals someone trying to change the ecosystem itself, and that is a much larger form of success. A person becomes truly influential when they stop asking, "What can I build for myself?" and start asking, "How can the benefits of this vision spread beyond me?" At the same time, Alice Walton's life continued to evolve in another direction that may be even more surprising to some people: health and medical education. Her foundation and the Alice L. Walton School of Medicine describe a broader mission around whole health, preventive care, and the integration of art, empathy, environment, and medicine. The school welcomed its inaugural class in 2025, with tuition covered for the first 5 classes. This is an extraordinary chapter because it reveals that Alice Walton's vision is not confined to one domain. The same person who championed art access also began investing in a new model of medical education. At first, those areas may seem disconnected. Perhaps they are not. Perhaps what ties them together is a belief that human flourishing is holistic. People do not live by money alone, and they do not heal only through isolated interventions. We need community, beauty, prevention, empathy, mental well-being, and systems that treat the whole person rather than only the symptom. whether one agrees fully with every aspect of her approach or not. The ambition behind it is clear. Alice Walton was not content to be remembered only as a collector or donor. She wanted to influence how people live, learn, and heal. That is a very large horizon for a life. There is something especially meaningful in the way these later chapters fit together. Art, education, and health may seem like separate worlds, but in Alice Walton's life, they begin to look like connected expressions of one deeper belief: that human beings deserve access to what helps them become more fully alive. Art can enlarge the imagination. Education can widen possibility. Whole healthcare can protect the body and restore dignity. If that interpretation is correct, then her journey is not random at all. It is coherent. It is the long unfolding of a person who gradually discovered the form her contribution was meant to take. And maybe that is why her story matters so much. Not because she followed a conventional entrepreneurial script, but because she shows that purpose does not always arrive in a straight line. Sometimes people spend years moving through one career, one challenge, one disappointment, one opportunity, and only later does the deeper pattern become visible. Alice Walton's life suggests that calling can be discovered in layers. You begin with instinct. You move through experience. You endure pain. You gain tools. You see the world more clearly. And eventually, your work starts to reflect not only what you can do, but what you believe should exist. Of course, none of this means the road was simple. It rarely is for anyone trying to build institutions, especially in public life. Founding a major museum, launching a foundation, creating a national arts access organization, and helping establish a medical school all require persistence, coordination, criticism tolerance, and the ability to keep going. When the work is complicated, expensive, and open to public judgment, people often imagine that wealth makes everything easy. In reality, resources can open doors, but they do not eliminate difficulty. Large-scale projects still demand vision, management, credibility, and the willingness to live with scrutiny. In Alice Walton's case, there was also the ever-present factor of public perception. When someone comes from a famous family, every project risks being dismissed as indulgence, image-making, or privilege. That means the burden is often higher, not lower, if you want your work to be taken seriously. You have to keep building until the results speak louder than the assumptions. And over time, the results in Alice Walton's life became too substantial to ignore. Crystal Bridges became a major cultural institution. Art Bridges expanded nationally. Her foundation broadened its philanthropic reach. Her medical school opened and welcomed its first class. These are not symbolic gestures. They are durable structures. They are evidence of a person who kept turning vision into form. What also makes Alice Walton's journey powerful is that it challenges a narrow idea of what success is supposed to look like. Many people assume success must follow one of a few standard patterns: founding a company, climbing a corporate ladder, or building a fortune directly through business operations. Alice Walton's story reminds us that there are other ways to build a life of significance. She worked in finance, yes. She comes from one of the wealthiest families in the world, yes. But the contribution that most defines her public legacy is not retail. It is institution building around art, access, health, and philanthropy. That is worth reflecting on because many people live trapped by expectations. They think they must follow the obvious path. The family path, the socially approved path, or the path that seems easiest to explain. Alice Walton's life suggests that real purpose may require divergence. It may require disappointing other people's predictions. It may require choosing a lane that looks less obvious, but feels more true. And when that happens, the question becomes whether you have enough courage to trust what keeps calling you. She seems to have done exactly that. She did not reject where she came from, but she refused to let it become the entire definition of where she was going. There is also an emotional lesson here about turning privilege into responsibility. Privilege by itself is morally neutral. What gives it meaning is what a person does with it. Alice Walton had access that most people never will. The more interesting question is how she chose to use that access. Again and again, the answer seems to be through institutions meant to outlast her and serve the public in some form. Museums, art-sharing foundations, health and medical education. This does not make her life free of contradiction or criticism. No public life is that clean. But it does show a pattern of turning wealth outward instead of only inward. That pattern matters because the highest form of success is not merely the accumulation of advantage. It is the transformation of advantage into something that creates opportunity, dignity, or enrichment for others. Alice Walton's story offers a reminder that the measure of a life is not only what it receives, but what it releases into the world. So what is the deepest lesson in the story of Alice Walton? It is not simply that she became rich. That part of the story is obvious. And it is also the least useful part for most people. The deeper lesson is that a meaningful life often begins when a person stops asking only what they have inherited and starts asking what they are meant to build. Alice Walton inherited wealth, visibility, and the pressure of a famous name, but the most compelling chapters of her life came from what she chose to create beyond those things. She teaches us that identity can be discovered, not merely assigned. She teaches us that art is not a luxury when it expands the human spirit. She teaches us that health and education can be reimagined when someone has the courage to think differently. She teaches us that even a life born inside enormous privilege can still involve struggle, pain, reinvention, and the search for purpose. And maybe most of all, she teaches us that success becomes far more beautiful when it learns how to give access instead of only collecting power. That is the kind of lesson that stays with people, because it reaches beyond business and into the question every human being eventually has to face. What am I here to make possible? And maybe that is the best way to end this story here on Billionaire Success. Lessons. Alice Walton's life reminds us that greatness does not always look like running the family business or following the path people assumed you would take. Sometimes greatness looks like listening to the quieter voice inside you for many years until it becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes it looks like building places where strangers can experience beauty for free. Sometimes it looks like creating new bridges between culture and community, or between medicine and whole person healing. Sometimes it looks like turning an inherited platform into a life of stewardship. Alice Walton's journey is not a simple fairy tale. And that is exactly why it matters. It is layered. It is human. It carries privilege, pain, vision, criticism, and purpose all at once. But through all of it, one thing becomes clear. She did not settle for being merely a name in a famous family. She kept building until her own contribution could stand in the world and speak for itself. And for anyone listening right now, that may be the message worth carrying forward into your own life. Your beginning may shape your circumstances, but it does not have to limit your calling. Your deepest work may still be waiting for you. Not in the place others expect, but in the place where your gifts, your pain, your curiosity, and your conviction finally come together.